Hello, everybody. This is Laura Alameri, and today I have a very special podcast for you, and it's with Mike Moraski with My Core Intentions, and he's also a coach, an author, and an investor. And his specialty today he's going to talk about is investing with multifamily, especially for short-term rentals. So I was very interested when I talked to him a while back because this is how I started with real estate. And so we have a lot in common there. And I really believe in horizontal investing. So I'm going to bring on Mike now, and he can explain more what this is about, what he does. And, you'll learn a lot from this session. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Laura, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So, introduce yourself to everybody, kind of a short bio about, your background and how you got started with real estate.
Sure. And I don't know that 30 years is really short, Laura. So I'll do the best I can. But like I said, I've been in the real estate space for 30 years. I started out as a sales agent. I had
Mm-hmm.
been in the construction business and woke up one morning and just was burnt out, couldn't do it anymore. And had a pretty big company in Chicago and took a year off. I sold that company, took a year off, and to try and figure out what I wanted to do. During that time, did a couple of house hacks long before house hacking was popular, and met a real estate agent who was very successful, and befriended him, and asked him one day if he would teach me what to do in order to go in the real estate business. He said he would make me a cassette tape, and some of the listeners might not even know what that is, but um, I listened to that tape, similar to a podcast you could listen to today, over and over and over again. And I really believe, Laura, success leaves clues, right? So I went into the business, and my first year in sales, I sold 78 houses in 8 months, built a team that sold 125 a year, went into the apartment business in 2005, built a team that we raised $18 million, bought 4,000 apartments in 5 different states, and had a management company managing about 7,500 units. Today, I'm in the coaching and training space.
Mm-hmm.
So all that knowledge, wisdom I put together and try to help other people. So,
Right. Yeah. No, you come from the old school of real estate, right? Where we were able to really, first of all, we had to learn things on our own. There was no coaching or training back then. Yeah, you knew some people, but you really had to build your backbone on your own and go out and experiment. And that's what I always tell people. At the end of the day, you have to just go out there and do it, right? To learn the process and the system. And then you develop your own style of real estate investing. And
correct.
that's how you get successful. So, what did you like especially about multifamily investing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that that's something that I always try to teach the new investor is there's an economies of scale with multifamily that you can't find in single family. And the
Mm,
one simplest lesson that I always tell people is, hey, look, if you own a single family property and you have a mortgage that's 1,200 a month and you're collecting 15 or 1,600 a month in rent, that's fine. But if nobody lives there and you're paying that 1,200 a month out of your pocket, that becomes painful. Where economies of scale come into play with multifamily is if you own a 3 unit, a 10 unit, an 8 unit, a 100 unit, and you have a 10%, a 15% vacancy, and another 5% economic vacancy, you can probably still pay your mortgage and pay your bills, and you're not going to be as paying as if it's a single family home. So I really like the economies of scale. When I am in the management space, and I had built a property management company that was a scattered site single family property management company. And what was interesting was I had 150, 160 properties that I managed at one point, and they were scattered. And so if you had repairs, if you had leases, if you had showings, if you had furnaces go out or stoves go out, you had to run around to all these locations, right? Where if you own 160 units or 10 units under one roof or a couple of roofs, everything is condensed. That's that economies of scale that make multifamily so powerful.
Right. Yeah, and I'm a big believer in that too. And like one important thing you said, is that when you buy multifamily, you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? You don't have like 100% full or 100% empty, like it happens with single family. So this is true, it's very much, that's why I started investing in single family, but then I quickly transitioned into multi because I saw that. So what, how can somebody get started in that? Because a lot of people say, well, I would love to transition into the rental, and especially with the multifamily, but a lot of people start with the single family because they think that's easier to get into, that's more affordable. And you and I know that's not really necessarily the case. But how do somebody new, what would be the first step to get started into investing in multifamily?
Yeah, what I would do is, first of all, I'd get some education, especially if you were brand new and didn't know. Go get some education. I'm a firm believer that the more knowledge you gain through education, the more successful you can be, especially in the short term. So there, Laura, you offer a ton of education for your, students and people that come to you to learn how to invest. And people need to come to you and listen to your material, your podcasts, read your books, and things like that that will help them grow, right? Listen to your sessions and come to your trainings. Um, and I believe that there's a lot of that out there, and you can take a lot of information, but then get your feet wet. Go
Right.
do a deal. I don't, we can take all this knowledge, but unless we execute it, see, it's only powerful once we execute it. Everybody has always said for years, oh, knowledge is power. And that's true, but it only becomes powerful when you execute on it. So you have to take that first step. So if you're somebody who's sitting on the sidelines or on the curb saying, boy, I understand how to do this, or I'm learning how to do this, but I'm just not ready to do this yet, I say get up off the curb, get up off the bench, and come and play the game, because there's a lot to learn by hands on. I think that some of the best lessons I learned because I was involved in the game, right? So,
Right.
for example, my first multifamily deal was in Chicago. It was an 11 unit property. And I was so excited that I was finally going to do this deal. And I went and I raised a couple $100,000 to put this deal together and didn't do any due diligence. I didn't look at any traps up front. I didn't talk to anybody. I listened to the seller and the broker say, oh, this is a great deal. You can put some CapEx money into it. You can do some renovations. You can raise the rents this much. And Laura, when I bought that deal and I closed on it, none of that was true. So I quickly became a don't wanter, and we milked the thing through and finally got rid of it. But it was just one of those properties you really couldn't do anything with. But here's what I learned. I learned that up front, you need to evaluate the deal and see if it's really worth pursuing. And once you buy it, then you really need to do some due diligence and roll your sleeves up and take a look at it and make sure that it operationally it's going to function for you. So I think that the lesson becomes in getting in the game, getting your feet wet, and doing the business, not just
Mhm.
sitting on the sidelines.
Right. No, that's so true. Unfortunately, you and I didn't have much of a choice when we started because, as you know, 30 some years ago, there was not a lot of training or people really willing to share their information. And so, like I started from experience getting burned on some deals and then learning from those. But people don't have to do that nowadays. There are people out there that basically already paved the road for them, like you and I, and so why you want to try to reinvent the wheel, right? Why don't you just follow somebody else so you can avoid a lot of the beginner mistakes and expedite your learning curve? So that's so true. Um, Now, share with me a little bit about, I'm not sure how you got started as far as financing, because a lot of people nowadays say, well, bank financing is very limited. And so I'm always out giving ideas of what type of financing they can start with. But I want to share I want you to share a little bit for somebody that says, well, maybe bank financing is going to be limited because they limit you on the number of units. They're very particular. You have to put a lot of money down as an investor. So can you give an idea of some alternative financing to start with that people can maybe start, thinking outside the box here?
Yeah, I might be the wrong guy to ask that question to, Laura, because the very first real estate deal I ever did was creative financed. And the seller held the paper and was the bank. So,
Right.
you talk about training years and years ago. There used to be a trainer by the name of Robert Allen who,
Yeah. I bought this book. Yeah.
right, and he was like really the only one around who taught real estate investing back then.
Right.
I went to a free 1 day seminar
Mm-hmm.
and bought his weekend package a couple weeks later. And I went to that weekend package and I was so excited. And I was going to go out and do this. And my wife at the time looked at me and said, "You're crazy." And what did I do? Monday, I'm scanning the paper and I find this 4 unit property. And I call the seller and I go look at the property. Well, I make him an offer and he says yes. And he winds up holding the paper. I think I gave him $3,000 down and he held the paper. We closed at a title company. But that was creative financing. I
Right.
believe that there are creative fund finance deals out there today. There's all kinds of opportunities. I just had somebody call me a couple of weeks ago about 5 properties he owns. He wanted to discount them. He'd hold the paper on them. So you have to look.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell new investors is, hey, if you don't have any money or you don't have any credit, that's okay. Use somebody else's money, use somebody else's credit. So go tie a property up, wholesale the deal, sell it to somebody else, and get in between, right? That's
Right.
what we typically try to do is just get in between a buyer and a seller, or take control of that property ourselves. So there's the other thing that I really, really teach, and I think that this becomes more practical for most people, is that your first investment, make it a multifamily. Go buy a 2 unit, a 3 unit, and I would say a 3 to a 4 unit property, and finance the deal FHA. Because if you go FHA, you can put less money down, you have easier course of selling. Your credit doesn't have to be stellar, and you can get into a small multifamily funded FHA and less money down, and get your boots on the ground and learn the business as a result of house hacking, what they call today, very famous
Mm-hmm.
word, right? And being right involved in that deal.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely, like you, I bought Robert Allen, Nothing Down. I think that was his book back then. And then
Right.
I bought Carton Sheets, No Money Down. And I was joking the other day, I was saying, anything that had no money down on the title, I would buy. But the thing is, a lot of those things don't apply today. But however, some of the principles still do, but it got me thinking outside the box. Like you said, you went out there and talked to a seller and put $3,000 down, and were able to do the deal. And that's the other thing I say to everybody: said, don't second guess what is going on. Don't say no, no seller would do that before you even try. So to go out there and actually talk to seller, talk to landlords, talk to people that might have the rentals that you're looking for, especially landlords that own already properties. And then maybe they want to sell, maybe they're willing to take terms, no, especially a lot of people are getting tired of owning rental properties, and there is a second type of motivation there. So
Right.
definitely, I would say start thinking outside the box, especially when it comes to rentals. That's crucial, right? To really see how you can exponentially go. And then you might have resources, you might have IRS, you might have lines. So let's talk about a little bit here about the beginning, right? You said that you had an agent that was kind of inspiring and a pivoting time in your career where you saw the possibilities and you start working in the arena with an agent, and as an agent. But also, what are some of the first lessons you learned? So what some of the things that you said, I wish I would have known in the beginning that, would have helped me, first of all, not to make certain mistakes, and second of all, to really expedite the learning curve?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think that, like I said early on, success leaves clues. And I really believe that. And I had, years ago, I used to listen to Jim Rohn all the time. He was probably one of the first motivational speakers who's still great to listen to today, right? But he talked
Hmm.
about that all the time, that success leaves clues. And if you want to do better or want to learn more, go to successful people. And there were things that I missed along the way. And I think there's things that we miss along the way. But when I think about the things that I learned, Laura, you and I come from the old school, and it's prospecting. Pick up the telephone, call people. The same techniques that I learned to be an agent and sell houses were the same techniques that I could use today to locate and source off market deals. So I can find some of the best real estate deals because I have that knowledge and those skills from back then. And those are some of the skills that I teach people today. How do we locate and source some of those off market deals? But one of the key things that I missed along the way, and I don't know if I just never was taught this or people didn't teach it, but your circle of influence is really important. The people you hang around with, the people who are in your life. So past clients, friends and family, if you talk to them and you ask them about a good deal or about a piece of real estate or if somebody is selling, you'd be surprised what kind of information you get from people. And I missed that along the way. And here's how I first found that out. I sold a house to a couple, and about 3 years later, I ran into this woman in the grocery store, and she said, "Oh, you have to come and see our new house." And I thought, "Your new house? I'm your real estate agent." She goes, "Yeah, we couldn't find you." I said, "Oh my goodness." So it occurred to me that I hadn't been staying in touch with these people, and we need to stay in touch with people because people's lives change every 30, 60, and 90 days. So even on the investment side, if you have somebody who's thinking about selling or you see something going on in their life, stay in touch with those people because that might be a deal that comes up. Um, but I realized with that lady that I missed two crucial sales: the sale of the house I sold them and the sale of the new house that they bought, which at the time were big sales. So these are some of the things that you need to learn. Something else was database. Nobody ever taught me how to keep a database or build a database. And it's really important in our lives today, I think, to track the people in our circle, the people in our network, whether you are on a social media platform doing it or whether you have a system on your computer doing it. It's important because you remember about people, you can follow up with them, you can talk to them, you can make notes, you can go back and call them when you need to call them or send them something when you need to send them something. And then the last one is that I would have went into multifamily sooner. I wouldn't have played in the single family space as long as I did, which was about 15 years. I would have went into the multifamily business a lot sooner. But back then, and you kind of alluded to this, but back then, people didn't like multifamily. It was not as sexy as it is today, right? And people didn't do some of the things back then that they do today, like stay in front of people. And so multifamily wasn't attractive, where today it is attractive. And I just would have went into it sooner. So.
Right. Now, these are very wise tips. And what's interesting to me is that people like you that have been in the arena a long time, you share the same type of tips and the same type, I wish I would have done this. So there is a common thread there. I interviewed last year my mentor, like you. I had a real estate agent that was a pivoting time in my life over 30 years ago, and she's still in real estate. She's in her 90s.
Wow.
She's a real estate broker in Hawaii. And I interviewed when I was there last year, and some of the things were the same. She said, I wish I would have followed up more.
Yeah.
I wish I would have kept more in contact with people. She's a top broker. She is actually she was on the board of Realtors for Honolulu. She was a $30, $40 million producer for several years in a row. So she's a top broker. And even with that, she said, I wish I would have kept more in touch with people. Sometimes she said, I lost the vision. I lost the concept that I'm dealing with people. It's a
Right.
people's business. And
Yeah.
like you said, to really be able to follow up, to keep track of people, to really have remembering that you're dealing with people. It's a people's business. You're there to basically help them and serve them at the same time and make it a win-win situation, of course. So that's something that I hear a lot in the community with investors like you that have been a long time, and it's one of the biggest regrets, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, keep track. I tell people you don't have to be any sophisticated. I used to keep track of my contents on 3x5 cards before even the spreadsheets were out there. And then eventually, we got the spreadsheets and now they're CRM. But it's always been a constant too, because like you said, to really keep track. Once you start having, hundreds of properties or hundreds of people in your database, it can get really confusing, right?
Yeah.
On
Right.
what is
Right.
going on where.
Right.
So
You
really,
know,
really powerful.
I think that's a key
Go
point.
ahead.
We are in a relationship business. And, so
Mhm.
often we're so busy, we wind up in that churn and burn mode. And we really need to care more about people. And, if we spend more time with people, learn more about them, and hence that's why the database helps. Put some notes in there
Right.
so that you can remember, right? Remember the last conversation. So, a question I always like to ask people that I haven't seen in a while is, hey, what have you learned since the last time I saw you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you'd be surprised what people will come up with, and the stories people will tell you and things like that. And we're just in a relationship business. We have to build better relationships.
Right. And the other thing that I think a lot of investors make a mistake is, not really taking the time to understand what the seller, the motivation behind it. Because, like I said, you second guess somebody's not going to do something where you don't even know what is their motivation, where they're going through. Because if you understand that, then it's easier to supply a solution, which like you, in the case where you got your first property for $3,000 down, and the owner was willing to finance. If you didn't have asked, you wouldn't have known.
That's right.
So what's the worst that can happen? He says no, right? So um, people need to be a little more, try not to second guess and just go with the flow and talk to the seller, talk to out there to people. You'll be surprised what some of the answers that you get. So
Yeah.
that's definitely, yeah.
What's funny is there's that famous book out there that has the famous quote in it that says, "Ask and you shall receive; knock and the door will be open unto you." And we just need to
Right,
ask more. We need to knock more, right? And open more doors and get more. Take more notes. Hey, I'm a big baseball fan, and people talk about Babe Ruth and all the home runs he hit, but nobody tells you about how many strikeouts he had.
right.
So, we have to have uh, more no's than we have yeses. So you got to ask more often.
That definitely, definitely. So now you have a long time career, and you are also like me in the arena of helping people and teaching people, especially when it comes to multifamily, because like you said, it's really you learn from your own experience that a multifamily made better sense than single family, especially when it comes to rental, creating passive income. So how can people reach out to you and get more information about what you do and how you can help them?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Um, One thing I'd like to talk about real quick is I wrote a book and released a book recently, and that's called Exit Plan. And the reason I titled it Exit Plan, it's your complete guide to multifamily investing and why you need an exit plan before you buy. We've talked about training and coaching and other trainers and coaches. And Laura, over the years, I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on coaching and training. And, some really great trainers, some really great coaches. Part of the problem is I walk away kind of not feeling fulfilled, kind of empty, like I was missing something. And I found that people taught us how to get in a deal, buy a deal, operate a deal, but nobody told us how to get out. Nobody teaches you how to get out or when to get out. I just read a book, 379 pages by a really famous trainer, author, somebody we love and respect, right? I got to page 370, and there was a little 8-line paragraph in the back of the book that said, exit plan. Now, after all your hard work, I thought to myself, geez, shouldn't we have talked about this up front before we ever got to the closing table and planned for that exit? Because that doesn't necessarily mean always selling out of a deal. There's different ways to exit, but
Right.
it's important that you understand that. So I wrote a book called Exit Plan, and your listeners can go get it, and they can find me through my website. So if they want to download a free copy of the book, that would be at mycoreintentions.com/exit plan, or they could send me an email there too at mike@mycoreintentions.com. It's the best way to find me.
Great. Well, I'm sure a lot of people, will reach out to you because I think I agree with you that this is a great way of investing, getting into multifamilies and really going to what you call the economies of scale, right?
Right,
And the exit strategy. You're right. A lot of the training is all about getting the deals, but not exiting or planning ahead because especially when you do rentals, what you're going to do with these rentals at some point, you know and so nobody really talks about that as much. So that's a very, very important topic. So
right.
thanks again, Mike, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah,
And like I said, anybody that has more questions, please reach out to him directly. Download this book because I'm sure there will be a lot of good information for you. And don't let don't let things. It's never the best time to start than now. Okay, so don't let things out there influence. Doesn't matter if it's good economy, bad economy. Rentals is always good. Actually, when the bad economy is good because less people buy houses. When the good economy is good, a lot of people cannot afford to buy a house because of the prices going up. So rentals, trust me, is always good, especially with like you said, short-term rentals. So
right.
great. Thanks again, Mike, for being here,
Thanks
and I
for
look
having me.
forward talking to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.